Hi, everybody. So today we are going to be talking about lesson 9.6, factoring ax² plus bx plus c. This is going to be the same as the factoring that we've done already, except now we're actually going to have a coefficient in front of this x². And that's going to change a little bit about how we find our magic numbers. We're going to learn about two different strategies. We're going to start with strategy number 1 called factoring by grouping. So the first thing that we need to look at is our equation in standard form. ax² plus bx plus c. Just like when we factored without this a, we are going to have an adding number and a multiplying number. In this case, b is our adding number, just like last time. And a times c, the product of a times c is our multiplying number. So instead of just having c be our multiplying number, we're actually going to have to multiply a in there as well. Let's look at an example to see what this looks like in practice. So for example 1, we are going to factor 2x² plus 11x plus 12. 11 is our adding number, and the product of 2 and 12 will be our multiplying number. So we need to figure out what two numbers add to 11 and multiply to 24. So let's look at our options. Numbers that multiply to 24 are 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. Well, to find my magic number pair, I need to figure out which of these factors also adds to 11. I know they all multiply to 24. 3 and 8 add to 11, so that's going to be my magic numbers. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, so feel free to pause this video if you need some extra processing time. We are going to rewrite our expression, but instead of 11x, we are going to replace it with our magic numbers. So we're going to rewrite our expression, but instead of 11x, we are going to write 3x and 8x. These are our magic numbers that multiplied to 24 and added to 11. Once I rewrite my expression, I'm going to take that expression and group it. It's called factoring by grouping, into two groups. The first two terms are going to go in the first group, and the last two terms are going to go in the last group. After I have grouped, I'm going to find the greatest common factor of each of my groups and factor that out. So in 2x² plus 3x, I'm going to factor out x. And in 8x plus 12, I'm going to factor out 4. You will know that you've done this correctly if you end up with twins. If you are factoring by grouping correctly, what is left in the parentheses should match. These are our twins. The final step is to take what is outside of our twins, in this case, x plus 4. That's going to be one of our factors. And then the twin will be the second factor, 2x plus 3. This is the hardest part of factoring, is factoring when we have a coefficient in front of x². If you always make sure to pull out your greatest common factor, though, of your groups, you will always get the answer correct. Let's look at a second example. Here we need to factor 12x² minus 11x minus 15. The first thing we're going to do is look at our adding number. In this case, we need to find the pair of magic numbers that adds to negative 11. Then we need to find our multiplying number. Remember, if there's a coefficient in front of x squared, our multiplying number is a times c, or 12 times negative 15. So our multiplying number is negative 180. One of the things that makes problems like this so tricky is that our multiplying number can get really, really, really big. So that means we have a lot of magic numbers that we have to look at before we pick the right one. So let's look at my magic number list. Because 180 is negative, we have to show a lot of different pairs to show all the options for negative numbers. So I have negative 1 and 180, 1 and negative 180, negative 2 and 90, 2 and negative 90, negative 3 and 60, 3 and negative 60, and so on down we go. Typically, as you're doing this, you're going to notice a pattern. 1 in 180 is never going to add to 11. So we can probably skip farther down to look at other factors. I decided to write as many factors as would fit on my paper just to show y'all in the example. Looking through this list, I now need to find which pair adds to negative 11. So I know I want my bigger number to be negative, so my answer will be negative. So as I look down, my last pair, 9 and negative 20. That is the only pair that adds to negative 11. Those are going to be my magic numbers. So first step, now that I have my magic numbers, is to rewrite my expression as 12x squared. We're going to rewrite this negative 11 as plus 9x minus 20x minus 15. So we're rewriting our expression, but instead of negative 11x, we are going to use our magic numbers. Once I rewrite my expression, I'm going to split it into groups. So the first two terms in the first group, the last two terms in the last group. If you rewrote your expression as with the negative 20 first and then 9x after, it would still work. You would still pull out the same greatest common factors. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at each group and we're going to pull out the greatest common factor. So the greatest common factor between 12x squared and 9x is 3x. That leaves us with x plus 3. And the greatest common factor between negative 20x and negative 15 is negative 5. So that helps us pull out all of our greatest common factors. And we know that we did it correctly because we're left with these twins. Finally, we are going to combine our two terms on the outside, our two greatest common factors. That will be our first factor, 3x minus 5. Our twins are our second factor, 4x plus 3. These are our factors. As a reminder, factors are the two terms that multiply together to get a product. And when we are asked to factor, we are being asked, what can I multiply to get this product? So that's strategy number 1, factoring by grouping. Next, I'm going to show you strategy number 2, which is going to be factoring using the box method.